Hello, and today on What I Wish I Knew at 30, we're joined by a true alchemist in the world of food and leadership, Glenn Flood. Glenn's career spans more than 30 years in hospitality, from Michelin-starred restaurants, the intensity of the kitchen, to the forefront of media and industry leadership. Forged in the heat of service, he's built not only an extraordinary reputation for culinary excellence, but also a powerful legacy in guiding teams, unlocking performance, and shaping the future of food culture. What sets Glenn apart is his ability to blend deep industry experience with genuine passion for people. He doesn't just solve leadership and team performance issues, he transforms them, creating the strategies and mindsets that allow individuals and organizations to thrive in high pressure environments. Whether in the kitchen, on stage, as an author, or behind the scenes, Glenn brings credibility, innovation, and an unwavering dedication to growth. His insights are as practical as they are inspiring. Glenn has recently written and launched his book, Secret Sauce, which he now adds to his long list of accolades. And today, he's here to share the lessons that he's learned along the way in what he wishes he knew at 30. Glenn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Fran. Geez, what an intro. Wow. Amazing. Thank you very much.
You're
You've
so
done some
welcome.
research there.
Did you miss anything? Did I miss anything?
Look, there's all those little parts in between, and I think like a lot of things, you've given the highlights reel, but the parts in between are the hard lessons, the sleepless nights, the reflection pieces. That's the real gold, the real meat in it. But the highlights reel sounds fantastic.
Well, you sound pretty amazing. And I've actually loved, with all my guests, I've loved actually digging into the research and to, what's got you to where you are now. So, Glenn, imagine we're jumping in a time machine right now. You're 30 years old again. Where are you? What are you doing? And what's going through your mind at that stage of life?
Yeah, look, 30 is just a really interesting time bracket. So that puts me in 2006, or puts us in 2006, which is the launch of Jamie Oliver's 15 Foundation in Melbourne. And that was quite a significant time in my career that really pulled me from the executive chef level running big teams into more of a training development capacity that's sort of segued me into coaching and mentoring. So that's a crazy time.
It's really ironic, actually, because when I was reading back through, sort of all of your stuff online, my sister actually was involved with Jamie Oliver in Plymouth at the 15 project down there many years around about the same time. So that was really interesting. I was reading that and thought, yeah, there's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, the stars kind of align, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the food industry, wherever you are in the world, obviously we're both in Australia, but the food industry is a very small industry, I find. Everybody knows everybody else. Everyone else at the top levels of chefing and food manufacturing are generally connected somewhere along the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And that sort of connection piece, and I'll go back to that. So 15, I mean, Jamie did such a good job down in London, and that network was just starting to expand. So I think
Yeah.
15 Amsterdam had opened up down south as well, in the UK, and then Melbourne on the radar with Jamie's good friend Toby Puddick, who was the initial head chef in 15 London. Came back to Australia, and the conversation with Jamie and Toby was, can we take this concept and broaden the reach, and what does that look like in Australia? And being the profile that he has, the networks are all over it. So all of a sudden I'm stepping into this role that we're filming a TV series, and it's just, 3, 2, 1, lights, camera, and let's go. And I think that was the capture side of it. But the reality side of it was I had a lot of work to do, had a lot of work to get a program up and running to trade disadvantaged youth in the ways and the
Mm.
nuances of kitchen life.
Yeah, and what an amazing. I was talking to. I've interviewed a number of chefs on this show, and I think that's one of the things that has come out. That are there enough young chefs coming into the industry.
Yeah, yeah, and look, yeah, it's not just necessarily coming in. It's maintaining or sustaining. I think
Mm.
that's a really big challenge in a lot of different trades, but the kitchen in particular. Speaking, I do a lot of work with TAFEs and training organisations, and it's that retention part is really hard because got young people that have come out, maybe love their food, looking at pathways in industry. They like to eat out, and it's quite a
Mm.
social environment, but the realities commercial cooking can be pretty hard. It's a 7-day a week operation.
Yeah.
Weekends are the busy time, so you're working when your friends are out and about, and there's the sacrifices to be made if you want to succeed.
Yeah, no, for sure, and I've seen that in so many, well, everybody in the food industry. So going back to, when you were 30, did you feel that you had life figured out at that point? Or were you just winging it?
Look, I like to think I was winging it with style, but in retrospect, I think I had enough knowledge to get me through, but I realized there were some massive gaps in my training, and one of the big challenges I think when I'd stepped into this role. So my role at 15 was training and development chef,
Right.
and all of a sudden I've got 20 young people of all different levels of backgrounds and upbringings, and carnage going on in their background, in their family
Mm,
life, and now I'm the authority. I'm the mentor, to guide them in the ways of the kitchen and to help them build a professional career.
mm,
And I didn't have the skills that I needed to emotionally regulate buying into their stories as well. So I think, and I've spoken to a lot of teachers. I got friends that are teachers, and I talk to them a lot about what that looks like. And I think as a professional coming into a training role, that if you don't have the skills or the tools to emotionally regulate, all of a sudden you're buying into all of your students' journeys, and that's a lot to take on.
yeah.
And that's probably one of the biggest things that I found was challenging. So naivety and ego and bravado pulled me through, and I was like, yeah, no problem, I'll be fine. I've led kitchens before, I can do
Mm.
this. But over a period of months and years, it really took a toll.
'Cause they really, Jamie was working with underprivileged children, wasn't he? That was the that was the whole point of actually giving these kids a second chance or a chance to actually have a purpose and to be able to do something.
Yeah, absolutely, Fran. I think Jamie's conversation around being dyslexic himself, going
Mm,
through a pretty average schooling type experience, being told, I believe, from teachers, you don't really amount to anything. Here he is, as one of the highest profile chefs on the planet. His cookbook enterprise alone is this behemoth,
mm,
published over 30 books. I mean, he's brilliant at what he does, and a very charismatic entrepreneur, and just an awesome human. But
mm.
at the time, that schooling he found challenging, and it was a program to help catch the kids and the students that had maybe dropped through the cracks, and that needed an opportunity, and that's exactly why 15 was created.
Yeah, and it's, it's had wonderful shelf life, and, hopefully it will regenerate at some point because it's a wonderful concept.
Yeah, absolutely.
So at 30, Glenn, what was your biggest dream at that time?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. Sort of going back into it, I'd been already cooking for 10 years. So I had enough experience under my belt to then try and work out what do I want to do and how do I want to apply this craft for the longer term. And I think at 30, it was for me more about worked Michelin-star overseas. I've done in five-star hotels, a lot of fine dining, restaurants, catering, and I was just trying to find my right segue in hospitality because there's a lot of different avenues, and that's, I think, kind of the amazing thing is that you can work anywhere in the world if you have your trade, your qualification, right? You know what you're doing. So everyone needs to eat. So you could be on the islands in Greece and pick up a little cash job there, just maybe octopus over a char grill, lemon juice, and there's something beautiful about that. Or you could find yourself in a large city. I was over in the UK working at a Michelin star restaurant at the highest level, doing just the most exquisite cuisine
Mm,
and learning. So there's always this learning side of things, and I like to think when the learning stops, the earning stops. So I also have this appetite for knowledge to learn and grow, and at that time, Fran, I was just trying to work out how do I want to apply my craft now, And I didn't realize it at the time, but I had a real passion, a real calling for this teaching, this coaching role. And yeah, just as I'd fallen into that role, I really started to explore it a little bit deeper. And then in retrospect, had to get the tools to clip together to make sure I had the teaching and the coaching down pat.
Yeah.
But I think that at 30, no, I didn't know it all. But you've just got to put yourself out there. You've got to back yourself in, and that was, I think, an important part of my journey. There was I was under pressure, I was stretching myself, but I had enough confidence, that sort of 10 years of in industry, to back myself in, to say I can have a really good red hot go at this, and to know that there's a few people I can call on to help me out when things get tough. As a younger person, they might not always appreciate that you can put your hand up and say, I'm just struggling right now. Who can give me the assistance or the mindset or the insight that I need to take me to the next level?
Yeah, and I mean, from what I've seen on the outside, I mean, the brotherhood and the sisterhood of the chef's world in Australia is incredibly strong, and there's an awareness around actually supporting and helping each other, and maybe that's just sort of through things like shared tables, but the Bocca store, all of those things where those mentor programs are in place, and there seems to be an incredible awareness around the young chefs coming through and the kind of support that they need because you guys have been there, you've done it.
Yeah, it's definitely, I believe, a growing area. This kind of mentoring type, nurturing
Mm, mm.
environment doesn't change the fact that kitchens are can be a tough vocation, but it's an exciting craft. And there's literally so many opportunities in the world, depending on how you want to earn a living out of food.
No, I agree, I agree. Did life take you where you expected?
Look, I don't know, because it's a one shot deal. Right? The beautiful thing about life, it's a roll of the dice, and you roll where you roll. I wouldn't say I'm necessarily one that's sat down and mapped everything out. I know people that are very, very planned and very organized. And I think the challenge that can be, if you're too strategic and too hung up on these are the goals that I must hit, that can also come with a bit of, you can let yourself down or hit your goals too early, or put a little bit of extra pressure on yourself. So more interested in thinking about, well, what experience would I like to have, and then being open to, there's a dozen different ways to get there. What I love, I love my snowboarding, I love my travel, and food and cooking was a vocation that allowed me to go through that segue. So I've had a chance to work in multiple countries, meet some amazing people, snowboard in the most incredible environments, and for that I'm really grateful. So I definitely utilized the skills and the trade that I have to carve out a great journey. To, when I look back on, as when I'm thinking more retirement and so forth, I won't think to myself, oh, if only I had traveled a little
Yeah.
bit earlier or gone and explored these countries, because I've been out and I've done it. And I think that's a really important frame to have, because there's another mentality that, for some people, that they'll work really hard throughout their career, and then I'll retire and I'll have all this time to go and explore the world. Yet you might not have the health, and you might not have the drive or the desire. And sometimes, traveling can be pretty bloody tough.
Oh,
So
yeah,
those
no, for sure.
experiences are hard to come
Yeah.
by, and they look great on the brochure. But if you're weeks off grid, or you've got to work out how to get from location A to location B, and I don't know, your luggage gets ripped off, or you have ill health, or anything can happen, to get to that destination. Younger people are a bit more resilient, so I think
Yeah, no.
there's a lot of balancing needs to be done in there.
Absolutely. But I'm a great believer in do it now. Don't put things off because you don't know. I found that in 2020. I was the fittest I've ever been running half marathons, and all of a sudden diagnosed with bowel cancer, and literally out for the next 3 years. You it's yeah, I'm a great believer in that. Do it now while you can because you don't know what's coming tomorrow. And,
Yeah.
not being a fatalist, but, yeah, you don't know when the rug comes from underneath you. It's like, yeah, I'm with you on that.
Absolutely, Fran. There's that sliding door moment. I've seen it, and been through it in different ways, shapes, and forms. And thanks for sharing that. That's a real personal journey. But to all of a sudden have that health, or that
Mm,
mortality just put right in front of you, and say things
yeah,
might not end well here very soon. yeah, you don't always have that time, so you seize the moment.
You do, and I'm a great believer in that. Anyone listening, a great believer in that. Seize the moment now, do it. Looking back now, Glenn, what's something you were completely wrong about at 30?
Completely wrong about. Look, I
Anything?
think one of the big things is, and it might have been an old school chef mentality, is just push through it. You'll be right, just push through it. You know, I'd I'd sort of later on learned, and this is more in the coaching journey, a little, phrase that stuck with me is the breakdown comes before the breakthrough.
Mm,
But that breakdown feels really shitty at the time, and it's really challenging, and that breakdown part is what I don't like to see, anyone go through.
no,
It's, it's hitting those walls, it's feeling that you have no options, desire that magic, that beautiful thing, that humans have that just is just ripped away, and all of a sudden it
no,
looks a bit bleak. And that sort of, that chef mentality of just push on, you'll be fine. It's not super healthy.
no.
Um, I think it's different than let's batten down the hatches, roll up the sleeves, and get through this busy period, busy service, this tough time of year, whatever it might be. Just pushing on is not always. It's not sustainable in the long term. And you shared there, Fran, that you're running half marathons, and I was running for a while there as well. And I think that there's good friends that I've trained with that are marathon runners and Ironmen, and they've seen way too many times that mentality of I'll just push through it, and the person's not hydrated, and then they literally fall over and collapse on their face towards end of marathon and are hospitalized.
Yeah,
So you've got to listen to your body. You've got to listen to your mind. You've got to listen to your body, and you've got to do the preparation work leading up to. And in a marathon analogy, it's not so much the run itself. That's just execution. It's 200 plus Ks you've laid down in training that
yeah.
allows you to get through that run. And I think a career is very, very similar. It's the small steps, and the mise en place need to
Mm.
accumulate so you can execute that intense period.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think there has been, the badge of honor was always the fact that you pushed through, that you did 100 hours a week or whatever it was. But you're right, it's not sustainable. I did it in the manufacturing industry where I'd open the factory at 5 in the morning. And because of clean down and everything else, I'd still be there at midnight. Sometimes I slept on the floor in the office because we were back there at 5 in the morning. But that's not sensible. It's not sustainable. And you do it through the busy times, but that I think there's a lot more awareness now that, that just isn't something that you can keep doing. And even though, as you said, the old school chef mentality or manufacturing mentality as well was that, oh, you just do it, just get on with it sort of thing. And, a pan comes across the kitchen or whatever it is. It's like that's just not acceptable anymore.
Yeah, yeah, and in that same sort of thought process, Fran, that what I do love about hospitality though is that there's opportunity if you have appetite to learn more, and it's not about. I think it's not about pushing on the employer and saying, I'm not going to do 100-hour weeks, 80-hour weeks, thing of the past, right? Again, not sustainable unless you're a small business owner, or your name's over the door. Then small business owners do what they need to do to get the job done, right? And but can you learn your craft and get to that that higher level in a 38-hour week? I don't think that's feasible in any
No,
vocation.
no.
There's a moment in time where you need to make a decision. What am I going to do? So same like school. I mean, the schooling journey or the university journey. There's the contact time at school, but the real learning's done outside of that. It's the study, the homework, the follow up. So in a kitchen, there's okay, let's say 38 hours, 40 hours, whatever it is on the tools. That's fine, but the real learning, the real gold can be outside of that. In what are you researching, where are you eating, who are you speaking to, and how are you nourishing your mind to grow and develop. So I always challenge young employees and say, don't expect to be spoon fed in any environment. You need to go in, you need to show that you're keen to learn and keen to progress. And, if you're there for a short period, just make sure that when you're on, you're fully switched on. There's no downtime in the kitchen. There's always something to do, whether it's just be cleaning or mise en place or learning more or setting up for the next day, because that's the exciting thing about the environment. There's just always more to
Something.
learn in the kitchen. It doesn't matter what level you're at, there's always more.
Yeah. Look, agreed. And of course, as well with, with young chefs having that, I mean, you mentioned it earlier, the emotional regulation is something that is so important for them because because life is quick in the kitchen. It can be tough, it can be pressurized, and being able to handle that obviously is incredibly important. Is that part of your role from a mentoring perspective that you work with young chefs on?
Yeah, look, absolutely, and not just young chefs there, Fran. That's just sort of, I mean, by default, I do a lot of work with younger chefs, but the real leverage points for me are working with organizations and their executive team, because I think it always starts at the top down. It's that leadership role, and then the leaders to be able to create a culture or a framework that then allows the younger workers to thrive. And I think that's a lot more sustainable. And one of the big things I'm working with clients on at the moment is around their succession planning.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, well, everyone's screaming for, well, we need more hospitality workers, we need more young blood coming through. And the reality is they're not necessarily out there on the market. They're
Mm,
already within your organization, but you need to be sophisticated enough and in tune enough to identify the opportunities to fast track their development and to keep them hungry and to keep them progressive, and they're your next rock stars. So
mm.
it's I think a really important part for any organization to be always thinking about that succession plan and that training. And that's why I'm so passionate about the kitchen leadership space, and hence the book as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm looking forward to reading that. It's on its way. They say life is the best teacher, and sometimes the lessons come wrapped in disaster. So let's talk about the biggest curveballs that life threw at you, whether it's in business, personal life, your relationship growth. What's one experience that at the time probably felt like the absolute worst thing, but it actually probably ended up shaping you?
Yeah, really, really good question there, Fran. I think when I think back to the challenges, it's the burnouts, and I've had a few roles where I'd felt that if I step away from this role, it's a failure, and I'd sustain again the just push on mindset. You'll be right. Just toughen it up, just suck it up, and go forward. So I'd put myself in these really intense situations, but not loving it, not loving who I was being, and showing up every day. And I thought that was a real turning point for me. So it felt like burnout. It felt like I don't have the magic that I want to bring, but yet stepping away would be a failure. So all of a sudden I was stuck in this sort of conundrum of you're not enjoying what you're doing, but yet you don't want to step away. Or if you can't step away because that's professional integrity, or it could be a sense of ego, it could be a dozen things, but it just felt rubbish. And all of a sudden, then you're not playing your A game. And I see this a lot with leaders all the time, Fran, where they're suffering from imposter syndrome. Is a really simple label to put over the top that
Huge, isn't
I'm
it?
not good enough for this. I don't have the resources that I need. Yet if I step away, then I've failed. I'm not a failure. And all this is happening in the mind. And what happens is the individual then is not being their authentic self, and they're not bringing their A game into the
Mm,
work, into the role, and they start to peter off, and it damages their personal brand and the way they view themselves. And I've touched that void on a number of occasions, and I've found it really, really challenging. And they're the I think they're the parts that when I've done work with coaches and gone back and looked at timelines and those pivotal points, they're the ones that I just wish I had someone to maybe put the hand on the shoulder at the time and say, this is very normal, or here's another perspective, or you should read this book or speak to this person that just can help you unpack and bring a different perspective. Because I think you're your own hardest critic, and most people are, and that's that self-talk is such an important part of the thriving and surviving, and can also be the most destructive part of any leader.
and so difficult because when you're in that sort of shall I, shan't I, when you're in that conflict, it's actually identifying what the true problem is. What is the thing that isn't aligning with your authentic self, or what are the decisions? How do you make those decisions? I mean, when you were in that situation, how did you actually push through that, to use that term?
Yeah, yeah. So the needed to lean on those that are around me, and whilst I didn't feel super comfortable about asking for it, was identified. So I had
Yeah.
a couple of really good individuals around me that I guess in retrospect they were probably mentors or people that I looked up to and respected. And the comment around, Glenn, are you okay? You don't look like your usual self today. That's the commentary. And to be courageous enough not to say, yeah, I'm fine, no
Mm,
problem. More around, actually, I'm just struggling with something. Can I chat with you about it? And for them to be able to hold the space for me just to unpack what's going on, and to hear that alternate perspective, and I think that the individuals I shared with, for them to reflect back and say, "Wow, that's what you see about yourself, but let me tell you what I see from my perspective. I see, a young person that's really dynamic, brings the A game, it infects those around them with really good energy, and we just think you're doing such a good job." So it was probably more of an expectation of myself rather than anyone else's expectation on them, and I just needed to recheck, to rebalance that equation.
yeah. And if you could go back now and whisper advice to yourself in that moment, what would you say?
I'd just say, just take a breath and slow down just a little bit, not completely, but just slow
Yeah.
down. And that's to me, it's an older, wiser person's journey. Because at the time, I'm 30, I'm firing. There's no time for self doubt, self reflection. It's just go. And I think there's a little bit of balance of that to make it a bit more sustainable, so you can really enjoy that journey, that 30s and beyond, because it's a really beautiful time. I think you know enough about, you made enough mistakes, you stuff things up enough as a younger person to then have a little bit more experience. But now you're looking forward, and you're looking at those that are maybe 50 years old, have more experience, and thinking, oh, when I get there, I'm still going to be, energetic. I'm still going to love what I do. I'm not going to burn out. I'm going to have a really good stories to tell. So there's a still a bit of proving to be done, to self. And yeah, I think it's a healthy space to be in. But to have someone to tell me, just take a breath, and just to give a touch more context, and just to slow down and enjoy the journey, would have been very helpful.
Yeah, brilliant. So how did that challenge change the way that you approach success now?
Well, that challenging time, and it was
Mm,
over a couple of years. There were a multiple, almost burnouts, in that phase, but it led me to take on a coach. So I was working with a coach from Leadership Victoria, and it was the first time I'd ever experienced something like that. We were a non for profit. This is at 15, and the organisation said, "Look, I've got a friend, I've got someone that can help you through Leadership Victoria," and came on as a coach. And working through with Corinne Armour, it was just very, very helpful on just some different tools, different techniques, different ways to look at things. And so it opened my love for coaching, because at the time I was having all these great NLP techniques and things done for me that were so helpful. And I thought, wow, I wish I knew this, 10 years ago. It would completely change the game. And since then, I'd gone on a professional development journey. Sounds maybe a bit like yourself, Fran, where I,
sounds
I
like it,
studied
yeah.
NLP, and I've done the masters there, and a lot of coaching and diploma in positive psychology, just because I'm interested.
Yeah.
They were tools for me, but they're very impactful in the workplace and as in the leadership space. So, yeah, to have those tools available, and just as a young person, I didn't know they existed. So it was exciting.
No, absolutely. And I'm like you, when I started 12 years ago, I had no idea. I had no idea what NLP was, had no idea about cause and effect, had no idea about so much stuff. And, my thirst for knowledge just kept me going and going and going to the next level and the next level and the next level. And I still do it now. Absolutely love it. I'm actually heading off to Date with Destiny in Miami in December with Tony Robbins,
Amazing.
which yeah, anyway, but that's yeah, which I'm really looking forward to, because it just opens up, you know, just opens up the mind to accept different perspectives, different things, different ways of um decision making, creating goals, create everything. I just love it. I love it.
Yeah. And I think that's something and that's why I've lent into this kitchen leadership space, because in hospitality, it's just not done. It's not mainstream, that kind of training and workshops. Yes, it happens. And what I try to bring into clients is creating that space for them, for the group to sit down and to think about their strategic plan, what's important, what are the values that sit behind the organization, how are the leaders showing up and influencing their teams. Because I find, and I think it's one of the hardest things for a lot of chefs, is that they inherit this top position because they're the last man standing. Old head chef left, and all of a sudden this young person is thrust into this leadership role, pressure cook environment, little to no management training, could be 8 or 10 different nationalities in the kitchen,
Mhm. And that's
and
what
they're
it
expected. to run a multi-million dollar operation. Now, in any other field, in corporate field, that is obscene to think that someone would step into that role with zero management training. Yet it happens every day of the week in hospitality, and I just felt that there's a real gap in the market there for the tools and techniques for these up and coming emerging leaders to be armed, and then at least they've got half a chance not to burn out and leave industry. They've got half a chance to step up and lead their teams, and know that that there's tools out there that they can utilize to get the best out of themselves and the
Yeah.
best for their teams.
Well, and to have that support is phenomenal because, as you said, so often it's the last man standing that is just then expected to step into a role that they really have no training for. So, if you go back to your 30-year-old self, and you could give them just pieces of advice, what would they be?
Just three. Yeah, okay, you're putting me under
Oh, we can
pressure
do as
there.
many as we like, but
No, of course, of course. Look, I think the ones that come to mind for me, I've already mentioned there, are just about just slowing down, just
mm,
a fraction, just take a breath and just slow down for a second and appreciate where you are and how far you've come.
mm,
That time just for self reflection, I think, is really really important. That then would allow me to then plan a little bit tighter going forward. So being more active in pursuing what I want rather than reactive to what's happening around
yeah,
me.
yeah,
I think that would have been really important. The second thing, Fran, is more around leveraging those around me. So I think of it like collective intelligence.
mm,
So when you're in an environment, there are some absolute superstars around you, but you've got to be confident enough and comfortable enough to ask for their perspective or ideas. And if it's too tight in the immediate vicinity around you, maybe you need to go a little bit broader. It could be a prior employer or a family friend, but having that mentor network and tapping into it, I think, can be very, very healthy. And probably the last one is gratitude. I'm a massive fan for gratitude, and little tools like keeping a gratitude journal. And I say this with clients, and I do it myself, even just this morning, like 3 things that I'm grateful for today. That ability to focus back in on the positive, because humans, we're hardwired for negative bias. So it's very easy to see what's wrong. And restaurants are absolutely classic for this. It's like sitting in a restaurant, oh, let me tell you everything that's wrong about this restaurant, as in, oh, here, the service, the smile, I'm not happy with this person, like the menu's not right, I don't like this, I don't like that, music's too loud, lighting's too live, all of those things are just happening in the
mm.
background, whereas it's twice as hard, 3 times as hard to dial into, but what's going well and what am I grateful for here? And I think training yourself every day to see that the positives in life can just be very, very helpful for a nice sustained career.
I agree. I think we're all experts in what we don't want, and really being able to turn that around to become intentional, to become purposeful to the things which we do want. And I think a lot of people find that very, very difficult to actually say, "Well, this is what I want." But when you can start to do that, uh, the world is a very, very different place. So I agree with you 100% on that. Gwen, do you think younger professionals now, do you think that they struggle with the same things that, I say we did, but obviously, I mean, our age gap is quite different. Or do you think they're facing a completely different world now?
Look, the world, and I've got 2 teenage boys, so I think the world is very different. Their experience of it compared to what I went through. There's fundamentals are still the same. Experience is still experience. Good people will be good people, and there's
Mm,
those people that aren't good people, and you need to call them out pretty quickly and not be around them. So I don't think that's changed so much with digitization and technology. It's the access to information is everywhere. So what I didn't grow up with is algorithmic feeds that tailor the content that I'm viewing and what I'm consuming all the time. Even just a conversation that's picked up by the phone that, let's say, I don't know, I'm looking for I don't know, a dining table.
I
All of a
know.
sudden, you algorithmic feeds are going around, oh,
Mm,
furniture and sales and things are coming up. So the technology is listening. It's live. AI is moving very, very quickly. And if you're not conscious about that, it is happening in your subconscious. And that is, to me, that is pretty scary.
yeah.
So this barrage of information, if you're not harnessing it properly as a young person, it can be really destructive. And I know even for me, there's that self doubt of, I should be doing more. there's more I can give, and it depends who I'm looking at and where I'm setting my benchmark for myself. That it's not always about more. It's actually sometimes about being really comfortable with what you're doing and where you're at in your own life, and trying to block out the noise. And I think the noise is just it's increasing, that white noise. So the opportunity for young people to be able to dial down that noise, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that they need to learn, that right now for all of us, really. How do you drown out the noise so you can just focus on what lights you up, what allows you to play your best version of yourself, and how you feel about yourself, and that self-talk part for you is the most important.
And it's a massive problem, isn't it? Everything that's going on your social media feed is, everyone else's life is so much better than yours. And, kids, I'm not sure, are emotionally regulated well enough or have enough like downtime from screen time to actually even stop and think about that. And, developing that quiet time, that reflective time where they're not constantly scrolling through things, is so important,
Yeah, yeah,
whether
and
it
I don't know.
happens.
I don't know if I can blame the kids. It's just that's the world that they're living in. But
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah,
the human consciousness has not caught up to that yet. And with
no.
the catapult of AI coming through, that tsunami of technology, it's can we keep up with that? Because the expectation, especially in hospitality from customers, is that that instant gratification. If it's not good, I will give you a review right here, right now, and
I
tell
know.
you it's not good. And that's quite brutal,
It's really brutal.
rather than being grateful for you didn't cook it yourself. You just came out here, you sat down, probably paid a fairly modest amount for a small transaction. Just enjoy that you're out and about and you can do that, because there's other countries where you just don't have that opportunity. So I think slowing down and just being grateful for where you're at and what you've got is a really healthy thing.
I love that. Glenn, just going back to what's the throughout obviously your journey in life, what's the best advice that you ever received and who gave it to you?
Best advice. Best advice. So I had again, it's another good coach that I took on in my later years. So this is after 30s now, probably 35, 40, where I was looking to push through and run my own business. And a dear friend of mine, Dave Lords, he's an excellent coach, works heavily in the finance sector. So he found it really refreshing to work with me because I'm outside of his sector. But he just talked a lot about the simple thing is confidence counts. Confidence counts. So whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're
You're right.
absolutely right. And he just worked with me in the right way to really embed that down. And I talked a little bit earlier about that imposter syndrome and doubting yourself, and just being confident that you're being the best version of you, and you're doing the best you can with the information you have at the time. So now we're talking what I wish I knew at 30. Well, I think for a lot of us, it'll be very different. If I had the extra, where am I? I'm 49 now. If I had that extra 19 years experience back then,
Mm,
I would have been weaponized. Like, look out, we're coming through. But we don't always get that chance. And the accelerated growth, the accelerated learning can come through putting yourself out there in environments that feel uncomfortable. That, the sweetest fruit to me is out on the limb. It's not in near the trunk where you're playing safe. So you've got to sort of climb out for that. But that comes with risk as well.
yeah.
What if the branch breaks? But what if you do get the fruit and then you enjoy it? So, that was probably the biggest takeout for me, was this confidence counts. And I try to take that with me every day, everything I do.
And that's great advice for anybody. I mean, I think confidence is probably one of the biggest things in any industry, in any business, everything that we do. People that lack confidence, it's tough. And I think being able to build that step by step without always comparing to everything else that's going on around you is a really, it's sage advice, isn't it? Find that confidence, however you need to do it.
Yeah. Simple, easy to remember, but very, very powerful.
Definitely. And I love, as you quoted that saying from Henry Ford, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. And that's 100% true. I really, really love that saying. So, Glenn, we've covered the deep stuff. We've been through some, obviously a very short synopsis of life and, some of the challenges and experiences that you've had in life. Now, let's have a little bit of fun. I'm going to hit you with some quick fire questions. And So not really to overthink, but just to, the first thing that comes to mind. What's the worst business advice or life advice you ever got?
There's a little saying, it is what it is. And I think I just challenge it on every level because, you don't have to accept the status quo. There's always,
No.
everything's negotiable. There's always a chance to sort of go, how does it look differently? So I don't always accept things on face value.
Nice, I love that. If you could have lunch with any historical figure, who would it be?
Ooh, there's a lot of good options there. One that comes to mind for me is Albert Einstein, and for an absolutely brilliant mind, just so much common sense. And I love, when Albert said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And I think as humans we get habituated and we're carrying on sometimes doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. And I just love the common sense in that. So brilliant mind, but a lot of common sense. He'd just be awesome to talk to.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think I'd like to come to that lunch. What's a guilty pleasure that you refuse to apologize for?
So I can go to a nursery. I love bonsai and I love plants. I love growing and horticulture. I can go to a nursery and just spend hours just walking around, much to the upset and annoyance of my family and my boys in particular. They just roll their eyes, but no, just plant and life and growth. And I think it's just such a beautiful craft. So I, th- I don't apologize for that.
No, 100%. That's beautiful. And if your 30-year-old self had a theme song, Glenn, what would it be?
So for me, it'll be Times Like These by the Foo Fighters. Strong guitar riff, strong vocals, but just time and a place, and just appreciating where you are at the time.
I love that. I love that. Your theme song. And the last one, what's one thing you absolutely sucked at in your 30s, but you've mastered now?
I don't know if I've mastered, but I've done a lot of work on self-doubt, and it's something I'm striving for. But yeah, in my 30s, there was a lot of self-doubt. There was a lot of questioning, a lot of imposter syndrome, and I've just managed to curb that narrative and worked on it for a long time. So I offer that to anyone. Identify it, not in your subconscious, bring it conscious, and just have a look at it and say, why is that so? Can I change that narrative? It can be very, very helpful.
Yeah, amazing. What am I actually thinking about myself that may not actually be true? Strong words. The Glenn, that was incredible. Thank you. I know so many listeners are going to resonate with your story, with your life experiences. But before we wrap up, let's do a quick recap. What's the single biggest takeaway that you would like our listeners, viewers, and people to remember from this conversation?
Look, I think if you've made it through this business end of the podcast here, I would just challenge the listener just to take a pause at the end, sit back, think about their journey. It doesn't matter if you're only a younger person. Just go back in a few years and say, if I could give myself some advice, 5 or 10 years ago, what would it be? And just reflect on that. Spend a couple of minutes just to reflect it through and then write down what comes out. Like carving that time out for yourself, I think is really important in a development sense.
I love that. And for everyone listening, here's my challenge to you. Take one thing from today's episode and apply it to your life this week. Maybe it's reaching out to someone who can mentor you. Maybe it's finally taking that leap you've been scared of. Whatever it is, take action. And if this episode inspired you, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you have a question or a topic you want me to cover in a future episode, send me the message. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for tuning in to What I Wish I Knew at 30. And remember, your best chapters are still ahead. So, from myself, Fran Harper, thank you for listening. And Glenn, thank you so much for being my guest today. I've really enjoyed our chat and look forward to speaking to you again very soon.
Thank you, Fran.
You're very welcome.